Не, это изи, нет, вчера было больше.
Independence Hall.
У них же есть там большой
Это вот. Нет, я на самом деле захотел быть сразу. Уже надо
У нас есть обязательные программы.
Guys, we just need to get through the gate right here. Take one step back. Open up. There we go.
Welcome to Independence Hall. We are standing in the courtroom where Pennsylvania's Supreme Court met. This was the site of a very symbolic event that occurred on the 8th of July, 1776. On that day, the Declaration of Independence was read to the public for the very first time. That happened out in the yard just beyond the tower of this building. After the Declaration of Independence was read, 8 members of the audience came into this courtroom. They climbed up behind the judge's bench. That painting is the coat of arms of Pennsylvania. It was painted in 1785 specifically to hang in that space. Of course, in 1776, the British coat of arms was hanging up there, the symbol of King George III's royal authority. Those 8 men pried the British coat of arms off the wall. For a few hours, dragged them through the streets of Philadelphia so all the citizens would get a very good chance to properly abuse them, and then they set them on fire. Well, they did all this to make a very simple point. King George III and his government no longer held any more power or authority here. Certainly desecrating and burning the British coat of arms, that was an act of treason. It was minor compared to all the acts of treason that occurred in the room just behind you. So if you turn around and go across the hall, we'll go into the assembly room.
I don't know.
Okay, once again, I just need to wade through you all. Pardon me. Two, as you come through the door, if you could, keep moving off to your right and to your left. We need to keep filling in. Kind of move away from the doorway so the people behind you can get into the room. Again, please do make sure all the shorter folks are up in the front. We're in the assembly room. This is where the Pennsylvania legislature met. They moved upstairs to make way for Congress. Now, Congress began meeting here in May of 1775. It was not until July of 1776 when the men in this room could actually bring themselves to admit that they had exhausted every other option. Independence from Great Britain was the only option they had left. We've been at war with Great Britain for over a year before Congress finally declared independence. We actually celebrate the wrong day. Congress declared independence in this room on the 2nd of July, 1776, when they voted to adopt a resolution proposed by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia. His resolution clearly stated that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. 2 days later, on the 4th of July, Congress voted to adopt the amended text of the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson. The last thing the men in this room are all worried about is which day Americans belong down barbecuing and setting on fireworks. Well, as far as most of these men are concerned, there's very little to celebrate. In declaring independence, they're now formally going to war with the strongest power in Europe. Great Britain had the largest navy in the world, more than 530 warships. The United States had 8. Great Britain had the 2nd largest army in Europe. But it wasn't best trained, it had all the best equipment. The United States had a bunch of militiamen and minutemen who had very little training and even less equipment. No man in this room could have known France was going to be our ally. The French government did not make that decision for about another year and a half. It very quickly occurred to the members of Congress. Achieving independence was going to be much more difficult than simply declaring it. And certainly when Congress declared independence here, they had no idea how independence was going to be achieved. Certainly they figured that out here. Congress met here from Wilson Revolutionary War. Then 11 years after independence was declared here, the Constitutional Convention came to Philadelphia. They started meeting here in May of 1787, swore themselves to secrecy, and they got down to work. And these men quickly realized they had to create the one thing that terrified them, a strong, powerful central government. They didn't have a choice. They had to create a government that would have the power to tax, a government that would be able to maintain order at home, a government that would be respected abroad. And they figured the only way that could be done safely would be to divide the government into three separate branches, the system of checks and balances. You know, the one thing that the Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court always knows for certain is the other two are watching. One of those three branches does something they're not supposed to do. If they are not doing something that they are supposed to do, the other two are going to take action to force the third branch into compliance. That's an amazing idea in the 18th century. So is the idea that one man could be the head of state, the head of government, and the head of the military. What most European governments divide up between three different people, we put all onto the president. So another important question here was how could you grant one man all that power? Allow him to use that power successfully, but still limit his power. And they came up with a lot of different ideas. One of the most radical to make it into the Constitution was the idea that although the president is the head of state, he is forced to justify himself to his people at least every 4 years. Every 4 years, he is required to stand for election. Throughout most of the world in the 18th century, to get a new head of state, he went through one alliance or bloodline. The old head of state died. The closest relative inherited that position. It didn't matter if they were incompetent. It didn't even matter if they were insane. You got the next one in line. Unless you're willing to exercise the other option. The people or the government kill the head of state and then put someone else or something else into their place. So another important question here is would this new American system work? Would you really expect the president, when he's not been reelected, to just hand all that power over to his successor and just walk? You know, quite a few of the men who wrote the Constitution, they were actually shocked by their own work. And, well, quite a few of them hesitated. Who could blame them? You know, nothing like this had ever succeeded before. So out of those 55 men who wrote the United States Constitution, 39 of them agreed to sign it. They signed it just for this table list, September the 17th, 1787, with George Washington presiding from that very chair. So, does anybody have any questions about anything before you go? Anything I've said, anything you've seen?
Rising chair?
Yes.
Are the books real?
The books are real. In fact, these are books we know either members of the Congress or the convention actually checked out of the Government of Pennsylvania's library. You know, no laptops, no Google. You had to look things up in books. And as you can imagine, they're pretty heavy on political science and philosophy and history and government and that kind of thing. Yes?
Which one is the rising chair?
The rising sun chair, that chair that Washington sat in, you look at the very top, there's a carving of the sun on it, so it's referred to as the rising sun chair.
Come with my sign. The rough drafts. Essentially, yes.
Я знаю слова. Я ж ты понимаешь? Да. Я вот она уже не помню, что
Это original document. Вот. Это наша конституция.
Do you know what city you're in? Can you say it?
I just say SAFEC. Ну, может, после этого вот. Да, и я подожди, знаешь, когда я хочу, чтобы ты еще нас повел? Вот это, как стрит это называется?